Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Embassy. My name is Christian Jolicoeur. I'm a consular officer here at the Embassy. Over the past couple years, we've offered this presentation on consular services to various Canadian communities across Mexico. But this is the first time we're doing this online using social media, so hopefully technology will cooperate with us. So over the next 15 minutes or so, I will be providing you with an overview of what exactly consular assistance entails. So I'll also mention en français que la présentation en français sera offerte à partir de demain, à la même heure. Donc j'encourage les francophones de se joindre à nous à la même heure demain, vendredi. Okay, so let's get started. So the title of our presentation for today is Be Prepared, How to Expect the Unexpected when traveling abroad. So the role of Canadian consular services abroad is divided in twofold. The first portion of the consular services is the preparation and education of Canadian travelers before they travel abroad, whether it's through our travel report, our website, or various types of information, which I'll go through in the presentation, how Canadians can better prepare themselves before traveling or embarking on a trip abroad. The second portion of the assistance, consular assistance, is in fact the assistance provided by consular officers from the various offices abroad, whether it's routine or emergency assistance, or even maybe international crises where consular officers are able to provide various types of assistance to Canadian citizens. So on our next slide, basically the title is Canadians Love to Travel. We've embarked in the past couple years over 60 million visits abroad. The large majority of those visits took place in the United States, approximately. And then the second most popular destination is Mexico. So last year, or I should say in 2012, according to Statistics Canada, close to 2 million visits of almost 2 million Canadians visited Mexico in 2012, and we expect that number to be over 2 million over the last 2014. Demographically speaking, the majority of Canadians who travel abroad are obviously on holidays and or the age in their mid-50s. In the next slide, we have a copy of a picture of basically which is all our offices abroad. You'll notice a red mark on the map. So we have close to 260 offices, embassies, consulates, or consular agencies across over 150 countries. They are each office is staffed with experienced officers that are always available to respond to calls from anywhere in the world. Whether it's routine or emergency assistance is required, we encourage Canadian citizens to contact the closest mission when they are traveling abroad. On the right of your screen, you'll see a snapshot of our contact details, for example, of our office in Puerto Vallarta. And I'd just like to point out on that green option, you see a button called Print Wallet Size Contact Details. So basically, it gives you the option, gives the client the option of printing a wallet size emergency contact card for easy access. And when you contact us after hours and your offices are closed, you have the dialing option to be transferred to our Emergency Watch and Response Center, which operates 24/7. Snapshot of Canadians in Mexico. We estimate there's about 50,000 Canadians living in Mexico on any given time of the year. Unfortunately, only a very small fraction of those Canadians who live in Mexico register with us. We estimate about 5,000 Canadians are registered with the embassy. And again, I'll go into a bit more details later on what the advantages are of registering with the embassy. Close to 11,000 permanent residents in Mexico, or Canadians, I should say, permanent residents, Canadian permanent residents living in Mexico. A steadily increasing number of snowbirds. We estimate about 3,000 snowbirds who live in Mexico. And as I said earlier, about 2 million Canadians visit Mexico every year. On the next slide is an infographic that my section developed. We tried to color code the map of Mexico based on our consular jurisdiction. You'll notice we have red maple leafs set across the map. Those are, each red maple leaf represents one of our Government of Canada offices in Mexico. The states highlighted in white are the jurisdiction covered by the embassy here in Mexico City. And we also have a consulate in Monterrey, a consulate in Guadalajara, one honorary consulate in Tijuana, and 7 consular agencies across the country. So for a total of 11 offices. So the consular agencies are located in Los Cabos, in Mazatlan, in Puerto Vallarta, in Acapulco, in Oaxaca, as well as in the Yucatan Peninsula. We have 2 offices, 2 full-time offices in Playa del Carmen and in Cancun. The other full-time office is our office in Puerto Vallarta. So what exactly are consular services for Canadians? Here's on your screen a list of non-exhaustive list of types of cases where consular officers can potentially assist Canadians who require assistance abroad. The most common of those types of cases would be the lost or stolen passport, hospitalization of a Canadian, especially if a Canadian is traveling alone and there may be a language barrier. Consular officers are able to assist Canadians who find themselves in medical situations or need assistance from the hospital. Also, arrest cases. Unfortunately, we're not immune here in Mexico, and some Canadians do find trouble, and unfortunately do end up being detained or arrested. So those are the 3 types of cases that keep us mostly busy, but as you can see on your screen, there's quite a bit of other types of assistance we can provide. Statistically speaking, on those types of cases, last year in 2014, we've issued the consular section here in the embassy as a fairly robust and large passport team. We issued over 6,500 passports. Those are regular and emergency, as well as temporary passport for Canadians living or traveling in Mexico. Of those 6,500, over 130 of those were emergency passports that we had to issue for Canadians who had an urgent requirement to return to Canada. Fortunately, 100 or so Canadians passed away in Mexico, and we assisted in the repatriation of their remains back to Canada. Close to 150 Canadians in Mexico last year were arrested or detained. And I'll go on my next slide on as far as what type of assistance we can provide under those circumstances. Medical assistance, as I said earlier, if Canadians are hospitalized, we can provide to ensure they're trying to get adequate medical assistance while they're in the country. Whereabouts, we talked about, we managed about 50 cases where family or loved ones or friends have called us and asked us assistance in locating Canadians in Mexico. Under those circumstances, we're not private investigators or anything, but we can try to locate and make certain phone calls with local authorities to try to contact or try to locate the missing Canadian. Assaults, about 25 Canadians were victims of assaults in Mexico last year. And I will also mention that we do process citizenship applications within the consular section, even though the citizenship portfolio typically is another department, citizenship and immigration, but abroad, Canadian consular services do receive and administer the application of citizenship for permanent residents and individuals who are applying for Canadian citizenship. One last mention is another type of service that we can provide are notary services. If Canadians in Mexico require the use of certain documents in Canada, and those documents may need to be legalized or certified by an official, as consular officers abroad, at embassies abroad, we're able to certify the signature on various types of documents for them to be able to be used in Canada afterwards. So those are the type of services that we can provide. Unfortunately, our mandate has limits, and therefore there are types of services that are sometimes the public believes that we can provide, but unfortunately we are not in a position to do so. More specifically, Canadian Consular Services cannot provide any legal assistance on private matters, nor can we get Canadians out of jail if they find themselves detained in Mexico. We cannot post bail. We cannot, fortunately, pay fines or legal fees for Canadians who find themselves abroad. As I mentioned earlier, we cannot investigate any crime or deaths, and we cannot seek preferential treatment for Canadians. If a Canadian is arrested or detained in Canada or anywhere in the world for that matter, we are subject to local laws just like any other country. We cannot either provide financial assistance or pay hotels or medical or travel expenses for Canadians in the country. Under those circumstances, if a Canadian loses all his or her documents or may not have any more financial means to get by, typically what we do is we try to put them in touch with either friends or family who are able to provide financial assistance. And under those circumstances, we would typically facilitate the transfer of funds from the family to the individual here on location in order for them to continue on with their travels. Natural disasters and civil unrest abroad. This is a particular type of emergency management portfolio within the Consular Bureau that we administer. We often, in types of crises abroad, ask Canadians to make sure they listen to local news reports, that they look for updates based on local news reports, carefully evaluate their security and safety implications, follow our travel advice. In times of a crisis, we do update our travel report and our advisories quite regularly, sometimes more than once a day. Therefore, we highly encourage individuals to register with us in order to receive those updates, but also to consult the website periodically. In times of a crisis, we also ask people to keep a low profile, and if the situation really deteriorates itself, to consider leaving the region while there is transportation means. The best example I can bring under this scenario would be here in Mexico. I believe it's back in September, we had Hurricane Odile hit the Los Cabos Peninsula quite viciously, and then there was not a mandatory but a voluntary evacuation. So some of us were deployed to the Los Cabos area, and within a couple of days we were able to facilitate the evacuation of about 1,500 Canadians back to Canada or elsewhere in Mexico. So just to give you an idea of what type of assistance Canadians could expect in times of either civil unrest or natural disasters. I mentioned earlier about educating and promoting our services. So the first step obviously is to read our travel reports, which I keep referring to, on our website, which is travel.gc.ca. We highly encourage individuals to consult this website before undertaking any trips abroad. The second R of these three R's of international travel is register. And I'll have a slide later on to explain the advantages and benefits of registering with the embassy. And last but not least is to reach us if you require consular assistance. So the travel.gc.ca website is a one-stop shop for Canadians traveling, working, or living abroad. It consolidates official travel content from about 12 different Government of Canada websites, whether it's related to passports, border services, health, or vaccinations. These are all the types of various government agencies that do provide advice to Canadians before undertaking a trip abroad. So we highly encourage individuals travelers to consult this website before traveling. On the next slide is a snapshot of specifically Mexico Consular Travel Advice and Advisory, which is the same we publish a travel report for every country, and it's divided by specific tabs. So you'll notice the first tab, which is the advisory itself. There's certain locations in Mexico we ask people to be more be more careful in their travel. The second tab on the travel advice is security and entry and exit. Security. The next one is entry and exit requirements. And I just wanted to mention very briefly, the entry-exit requirements for Mexico are quite specific, especially if you're planning on entering by land. So I highly encourage any Canadians traveling into Mexico and traveling and crossing into the or crossing the U.S.-Mexico border to consult the entry requirement on our website, because there's specific things to consider when using the land border into Mexico. The next tab is health, where we provide information about epidemics or vaccines that may be required in the country. Local laws, in local laws, we would provide information on different cultural aspects or legal particularities of the country that Canadians should be aware of. There's a natural disaster tab in climate, which provides more information on the types of disasters that you could expect in the country. And more importantly, the last tab is assistance, which provides a list of all our offices, which as I mentioned earlier, includes the green button where you can print this pocket-size emergency card for easy access. I mentioned briefly on the previous slide that there's 4 different levels of advisories. These applies to the government of Canada as a whole. We have the same level, the same structure for every country. So the first level advisory is exercise normal precautions, which is basically asking Canadians to there's no specific advisories or concerns in those areas. The first level advisory is exercise a high degree of caution. And in these areas, typically we ask Canadians inform Canadians there are some concerns with regards to local security environment, and that travelers are asked to remain vigilant and alert within that area. The second level is to avoid non-essential travel. There are areas in Mexico where we ask Canadians to avoid non-essential travel. These are areas where there are serious concerns in regards to the local security environment. And the last level, which does not apply here in Mexico, is avoid all travel where personal security is of great risk, and Canadians are advised to avoid the region altogether. So to give you a visual perspective of these advisories that we produce, here in Mexico, we've color-coded a bit the advisories that we're providing. So the areas that are pinkish red are advisories or locations or states that we ask Canadians to avoid non-essential travel. Typically that has been more the northern part of Mexico, but the last couple years we've had to add the state of Michoacan and Guerrero because of ongoing instability in those regions. Although you will notice on that map there's some yellow dots within Guerrero and Michoacan. Those are Ixtapa and Acapulco, and I believe Tasco in the state of Guerrero, where we exclude those areas from avoid non-essential travel, but still highly recommend Canadians exercise a high degree of caution when they find themselves in those areas. The yellow area on the map is exercise a high degree of caution, and the areas highlighted in green are areas where there's no specific advisory, and just we simply ask Canadians to exercise normal security precautions. So the next R on the 3 R's of international travel is registration of Canadians abroad, which is a quick, free, and confidential system that we use to gather information on Canadians who are traveling or live abroad. And with that database, we're able to contact Canadians in times of a crisis or in times of an emergency. The best example I can offer is this evacuation. We assisted the Canadians evacuating from Cabo. While communication means were quite limited, we were able to disseminate information to those Canadians who were registered with us, either by text messages, emails, and so on. So we have various types of tools that we can use in our system in order to reach out to Canadians under those circumstances. And I understand our headquarters recently developed a mobile-friendly app, so it's easy for Canadians to register with us on their smartphone when traveling. Traveling with minors, individuals that are children that are 18, that are under the age of 18, require a consent letter from their parents if they are traveling alone, or they also require if a parent is traveling without the other parent. So if the child is traveling with only one parent, the adult requires a consent letter from the parent that is not traveling. On our website, there is on the travel.gc.ca website, there is a link also to Children and Travel, where you can find an interactive page where you fill in the blanks and it pre-populates a letter of consent that is required, that is highly recommended when traveling under those circumstances with a minor. That letter we highly recommend that letter be certified by either a lawyer or a notary in Canada. But if you find yourself abroad, you can also certify that letter through one of our consular officers at the embassies or one of our points of service. So abroad, I've been mentioning a lot of the services that we've been or we can offer as consular officers when abroad, but there's a whole other team back at headquarters that is able to assist and provide assistance to ourselves and to Canadian citizens when a crisis occurs. So there's an Emergency Watch and Response Center, which administers international crises that are affecting Canadians abroad. And this section operates 24/7 and is also our call center after hours. So if you require consular assistance after hours and you call the embassy, as the embassy might be closed, you have the dialing option of being transferred directly to this Emergency Watch and Response Center in Ottawa. And from there, they're able to provide you further assistance. And if required, they can contact us using our cell phones after hours. Other types of services that Canadians may seek when abroad are not necessarily offered by the Consular Bureau, by the consular officers abroad, but can be obtained through contacting Service Canada. So whether it's related to taxes, customs, pension, understand Canadians who may be entitled to a Canadian pension can receive their pension here in Mexico, but that is all undertaken directly by dealing with other government agencies. And you're able to do so by dialing this toll-free number directly from Mexico. And there's an agent that answers the phone directly. So I encourage any Canadians requiring any other types of assistance that might fall outside our consular mandate to contact Service Canada using this phone number. Travel insurance, extremely important, and I can't stress how important it is to obtain and procure yourself travel insurance before traveling abroad. We've had recently a couple of young Canadians who have had accidents here in Mexico and unfortunately did not procure themselves travel insurance before undertaking their trip and found themselves with a medical bill totaling thousands of dollars before they were able to be released by the hospital. So a little plug that I'd like to make sure that everybody listening in ensures that they procure themselves sufficient travel insurance before undertaking any trip abroad, not only in Mexico, but anywhere across the world. So on the next slide is just a quick snapshot of various social media tools that we use to connect with and reach out to the Canadian community in Mexico. We obviously are using now Google Hangout to promote our consular services, but we're also very active both on Facebook and Twitter. We have a very busy public affairs section, which uses such means of communication to promote Canada, but also inform the Canadian community of various activities that the embassy is undertaking. So I highly encourage you after this presentation to take a couple minutes and visit these Facebook and Twitter accounts and register with us. This is the end of my presentation. On your screen, you will now see our contact details. And I encourage Canadians who have any questions related to this presentation to email us at the address on your screen. There's also the phone number, which is an emergency line, which goes directly to the consular section. We typically answer that phone from 9 to 5, but as I said earlier, if you require consular assistance after hours, you will have the dialing option to be transferred directly to our emergency response and watch center in Ottawa. And there's also a toll-free number where you can reach them directly by using from Mexico here on your screen. So I believe that is all for me. I thank you very much for your time and sincerely hope that this presentation was useful for the audience. And as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to email that your questions to the email address which was on your screen a couple of seconds ago. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.